Oh, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it.
Bane's story can't really be separated from where he comes from. Born and raised in the prison of Benaduro on the Caribbean island of Santa Prisca, his entire life was shaped by confinement, violence, and the need to adapt. Created by Chuck Dixon and Doug Munch and Graham Nolan in Batman Vengeance of Bane #1, 1993. From childhood, Bane served his father's life sentence, growing up behind bars among killers and soldiers. He educated himself through observation and survival. A Jesuit priest taught him philosophy and language. When he volunteered for the experimental Venom program, it didn't just amplify his body, it perfected his method. Santa Prisca has always anchored his identity. The island, part Caribbean, part Latin American, in its political tone, his creators pulled from Latin and revolutionary imagery, and design modeled partly after Mexican luchadors gave that influence visual permanence. The version of Bane that breaks Batman's back in Nightfall isn't just a physical threat, he's a man who understands how systems collapse. And in a universe filled with monsters and masterminds, Bane endures because he's both. Everything he's become, his discipline, his intellect, his obsession with control, traces back to that first cell in Santa Prisca, where the boy who should have been broken learned instead to endure. When I was growing up, I didn't always see a lot of people with last names like mine in the pages of superhero comics, and when I did, it meant something, even if I couldn't quite explain why at that time. Representation isn't just about identity, it's about connection. It's about knowing that somewhere in a universe of aliens, gods, and mass vigilantes, there's someone whose story starts a little closer to home. For a long time, Hispanic and Latino characters in comics were background figures, supporting roles, sidekicks, or stereotypes. But over the years, DC started to change that. They began creating heroes with dimension, heroes with roots, characters who reflected not just where we came from, but what we bring to the table: resilience, complexity, and heart. Jaime Reyes didn't just inherit the Blue Beetle mantle, he reinvented it for a new generation. Renee Montoya didn't just wear a mask, she challenged what justice looked like in a broken system. Jessica Cruz didn't overcome fear, she lived with it and kept going anyway. These stories matter because they show the scope of what heroism can look like. They remind us that power isn't defined by origin, it's shaped by experience. And as someone with Hispanic heritage myself, it's hard not to feel a sense of pride in seeing how far these characters have come, and how much further they can go. So today we're looking at 10 Hispanic heroes who helped shape the DC universe, characters who've added their voices, their perspectives, and their legacies to a mythology that keeps evolving. If you love exploring how culture and storytelling intersect, make sure to like the video and subscribe, and join the conversation down below. Let me know what Hispanic heroes are your favorite, because this isn't just about comics, it's about the people behind the masks, and the worlds that they inspire. Alright, with that said, let's dive in. Selina Kyle has always walked the line between hero and criminal, justice and survival. She's a thief, a fighter, and one of Gotham's most complex figures, not because of what she steals, but because of what she represents. Catwoman isn't defined by her claws or costumes, she's defined by her choices. Every rooftop chase, every moment of tension with Batman comes down to one thing: control. In a city that thrives on power and fear, Selina has learned to take both back on her own terms. But beneath the mask, her story carries something deeper. Across decades of comics, her background has shifted with the times. Yet a key part of her identity often goes overlooked. In Catwoman, Lonely City, part of DC's Black Label, Selina is explicitly identified as a white Hispanic woman. The detail isn't new, it's a return. It traces back to Catwoman number 81 to 89, where we learn her mother, Maria Kyle, was a Cuban refugee, and her father, Brian, an Irish-American drifter. Her childhood in Gotham wasn't glamorous, it was desperate. Poverty, loss, and survival shaped her long before she ever crossed paths with Bruce Wayne. Her life reflects something many children of immigrants understood: the world doesn't give second chances, so you learn to make your own. Writers for the 90s and early 2000s like Bronwyn Carlton and Stas Johnson made that part of her heritage explicit, grounding her in a Cuban-American lineage that gave weight to her resilience. Even Harley Quinn offhandedly confirmed in Catwoman number 89, teasing that Selina's dad's Irish and her mom's Cuban or something. It's a throwaway line with lasting implications because for all of Catwoman's reinventions, whether portrayed as Italian-American, fully white, or racially ambiguous, those Cuban roots remain a vital thread in her mythos. Selina Kyle isn't just Gotham's most infamous thief, She embodies reinvention, identity, and survival. Her connection to Batman may define her in the headlines, but her heritage, her independence, and her ever-changing morals define her legacy. In a universe of masks, hers tells a story about culture, class, and the fight to belong. A story that's as much about Gotham as it is about its people who live in its shadow. Vibe's history reflects how DC reshapes its hero to match the world around them. Introduced in Justice League America Annual Number 2 in 1984 as Paco Ramon, he was one of the few Latino heroes in mainstream comics at the time. A Puerto Rican kid from Detroit who used his powers to protect his neighborhood after the death of his brother Armando. Those powers were tied to vibration, shockwaves strong enough to level buildings, and sonic pulses precise enough to disarm an enemy. It was a street level ability in a grounded setting, and that's what made it stand out. When DC rebooted his continuity after Flashpoint, the character returned as Francisco Cisco Ramon, with his powers redefined through science fiction rather than accident. During the Darkseid invasion of Earth, Cisco's body was altered by exposure to the boom tube energy, granting him the ability to perceive and manipulate dimensional frequencies. He could track breaches across realities, detect temporal disturbances, and weaponize resonance itself. That shift placed him in a unique position within the modern Justice League, as both an early warning system and an expert in interdimensional phenomena. His recruitment by Argus built on that role, turning him into one of their most valuable metahuman operatives. In parallel, the Arrowverse adaptation reframed Cisco as an engineer and scientist, keeping his Puerto Rican identity central to the story. His family, particularly his relationships with Armando and Dante, served as an emotional grounding. The show emphasized something that comics often hinted at, the connection between cultural identity and responsibility. Cisco's humor and intelligence made him accessible, but his loyalty to family and community remained at his core. Across comics and television, Vibe's trajectory has included death, resurrection, and erasure. Yet the through line remains consistent, a working class hero born out of loss, rebuilt through science, and bound by a sense of place. Vibe stands at the intersection of culture and cosmology, a character whose powers may reach across worlds, but whose origins never drift far from home. Jaime Reyes marks a turning point in how DC approached legacy and representation. Introduced in Infinite Crisis number 3 in 2006, he isn't a sidekick or derivative hero. He's the third Blue Beetle, inheriting the name but not the circumstances of his predecessors. Living in El Paso, Jaime finds the alien Scarab, an artifact of the Reach that fuses his spine and redefines what a hero in the DC universe could look like. The Scarab grants him flight, energy protection, adaptive weaponry, and a living suit that communicates with him directly, often questioning his restraint when violence would be more efficient. What separates Jaime from earlier versions of Blue Beetle is how inseparable his powers are from his context. He's not a billionaire inventor or a vigilante scientist. He's a Mexican-American teenager balancing family, school, and the weight of alien technology that could level a city. His home isn't a background detail, it's the spine of a narrative. His parents, his sister Milagro, and his extended family remain active participants in every stage of his story. They argue, protect, and adapt alongside him. That openness, his refusal to live a double life, is rare in superhero fiction and grounded in a distinctive Latino framework of collective identity over secrecy. DC's more recent versions, especially the Blue Beetle film in 2023, expanded the foundation rather than rewriting it. The movie situates Jaime's transformation amid economic precarity and cultural continuity. A graduation, a job search, a household that measures success not by status but by survival. In the broader continuity, Jaime's arc is spread across major events like the Infinite Crisis, Sinestro Corps War, Forever Evil, but his significance isn't in scale, it's in framing heroism as something inherited through community rather than isolation. The Blue Beetle armor may come from another world, but the values guiding it are local, human, and specific. Jaime Reyes stands as one of the few modern heroes whose mythology begins not with solitude, but with everyone who refuses to let him face the universe alone. Kendra Saunders occupies a distinct place in DC's mythology, one defined by inheritance, fragmentation, and rebirth. Introduced in JSA Secret Files and Origins 1 in 1999, she reimagined the Hawkgirl mantle for a modern era while carrying forward the weight of a story that began in the Golden Age. Kendra is a granddaughter of Speed Saunders, and in later continuities, of Cuban descent, a detail that repositions the Hulker lineage within a broader, more diverse cultural history. Her powers stem from the nth metal, the alien substance that defies gravity, heals wounds, and extends life beyond natural limits. For Kendra, those abilities aren't a gift, they're a burden that ties her to an endless cycle of death and reincarnation she never chose. Her story begins with loss. After taking her own life, Kendra's body becomes host to the soul of her great aunt, Shira Sanders Hall, the original Hawkgirl. The result is not resurrection, but coexistence. Two identities, bound by history and trauma. Hawkman remembers every incarnation of their shared existence. Kendra remembers only fragments. That imbalance drives much of her character, a woman rebuilding autonomy under the weight of the memory that isn't entirely hers. Her connections within the DC universe reflect the same tension between legacy and independence. She served with both the Justice Society and the Justice League and taken command positions, most notably leading the Black Hawks during the Dark Knight's Metal. But her most compelling conflicts remain internal. The haunting cycle of love and violence with Hawkman, the daughter she gave up for adoption, the recurring battle against Aztek, all underscore the character trope between cosmic mythology and personal consequence. Kendra's identity as a Latina hero doesn't exist apart from that mythology, it reframes it. The Hawkgirl story, once confined to ancient Egypt and reincarnated romance, now carries a dimension of migration, memory, and belonging. Kendra Saunders is more than a continuation of Shira Hall. She is the first Hawkgirl to fully question what being reborn actually cost. Jessica Cruz stands apart within the Green Lantern mythology because her story begins with fear, not courage. First appearing in Justice League number 30 in 2014, she was an ordinary young woman of Mexican and Honduran descent when she witnessed a violent crime that left her isolated and terrified to leave her home. The trauma defined her early arc, years spent living with anxiety and agoraphobia, until the Ring of Voltum, an artifact fueled by fear rather than willpower, chose her as its host. Where other lanterns overcome fear, Jessica's began by being consumed by it. Her eventual liberation from the Voltum marked one of DC's clearest turns towards realism within its cosmic framework. Rather than erasing her anxiety, the narrative treated it as something permanent, an ongoing condition that coexists with her heroism rather than contradicting it. When she finally earns a true Green Lantern ring, that shift carries weight. The ring doesn't fix her, it trusts her. Within the core, Jessica's role has continued to expand. Her partnership with Simon Baz grounded the Green Lantern series in a shared vulnerability. Her alliances with Hal Jordan and the Justice League have placed her at the center of large-scale conflicts, including the Darkseid War and Justice League Odyssey, without reducing her to a symbol or subplot. Across these stories, her cultural background, Mexican and Honduran, is acknowledged directly. Her visibility in both comics and fandom has made her more than a single character. She's become a case study in how resilience can coexist with vulnerability, and how fear, when acknowledged, can evolve into something closer to strength.
Like I said before, we got there on time. Bullock was down. He said there were still suspects inside, so I entered.
Renee Montoya first introduced in Batman the Animated Series before transitioning into comics through Batman number 475 in 1992. She began as a supporting detective in the Gotham City Police Department. Born to Dominican parents who immigrated to Gotham in search of stability, across Gotham Central, 52, and Detective Comics, Montoya's narrative evolves into one of the most layered portraits DC has ever given a street-level character. Her partnership with Harvey Bullock, while her friendship with Crispus Allen exposed her to the moral cost of police in Gotham. As corruption deepened and her sexuality became a public target, Renee's identity fractured under pressure, culminating in alcoholism, resignation from the force, and an identity stripped down to its raw core. What followed wasn't redemption in the traditional sense, but transformation. Through the mentorship and death of Vic Sage, she inherited the mantle of the Question. As the Question, Montoya channeled her investigative skill, combat training, and moral conviction into a form of justice unbound by bureaucracy. Renee Montoya remains one of DC's most significant characters precisely because she embodies intersectionality without simplification. She's Dominican, queer, working class, and deeply human, navigating spaces that rarely make room for any of those identities to coexist. In a world of gods and symbols, Montoya represents the cost of justice when there's no mask left to hide behind it. Kyle Rayner's place in the Green Lantern mythology has always been defined by a reinvention. Introduced in Green Lantern number 48 in 1994, he emerged during one of DC's most dramatic status shifts. After Hal Jordan's fall and the destruction of the Corps, Kyle became the only Lantern left. He wasn't a soldier or test pilot, he was an artist, a graphic designer from LA who approached power not through discipline but through imagination. That creative perspective shaped everything that followed, from the constructs he built to the kind of hero he became. For years, Kyle was written primarily as Irish American, but later stories revealed a more complex background. His father, Gabriel Vasquez, was a Mexican American CIA agent whose identity had been hidden from Kyle throughout his life. That revelation recontextualized his sense of belonging, not as a sudden redefinition, but as a missing piece that fit the story's larger themes of identity and discovery. DC has since leaned into that heritage more directly, especially in recent material and Hispanic Heritage Month features, acknowledging him as a Latino hero whose background had long existed in the margins of continuity. Where Hal Jordan favors precision and John Stewart favors structure, Kyle treats the ring as an instrument for interpretation. His tenure as Ion, as Torchbearer, and as a member of the Justice League carried that sensibility into cosmic scale. Culturally, Kyle's Mexican heritage has yet to be woven deeply into his ongoing characterization, appearing mostly through brief dialogue and visual cues rather than full narrative integration. Kyle Rayner remains the most human of the Lanterns, not because he's less powerful, but because his story always has been about creation and the aftermath of collapse, and the ongoing search for where and to whom he belongs. Yolanda carries one of the quieter but more enduring legacies in DC's second generation of heroes. Introduced in Infinity Inc. number 12, 1985, she emerged at a time when legacy characters were being used to modernize the Golden Age lineup. Her story did more than extend the name. As the goddaughter of Ted Grant, the original Wildcat, Yolanda inherited not his powers, but his purpose. Her abilities came from something more grounded: her mother's exposure to experimental drugs during pregnancy, which gave Yolanda enhanced agility, strength, and retractable claws, and heightened senses. Unlike her predecessor, she wasn't trained into heroism, she was born into it, and that's a distinction that set her apart. Her earlier appearances in Infinity Inc. positioned her among a generation trying to reconcile inherited ideals with their own identities. As a Mexican-American heroine, her perspective added a layer often missing from the Justice Society's orbit, a view from the outside, and the tradition that she was being asked to uphold. Across both comics and screen, Yolanda's character endures because she embodies an ideal central to DC's evolving landscape. Legacy isn't inherited, it's interpreted. Her version of Wildcat doesn't erase Ted Grant's history, it questions what that history means for someone from a different background. Aztek is one of DC's most ambitious attempts to merge superhero mythology with pre-Columbian cosmology. Created by Grant Morrison and Mark Miller in Aztek The Ultimate Man #1 in 1996, the mantle is defined by devotion to the god Quetzalcoatl and the opposition to his eternal rival Tezcatlipoca. From its first appearance, the story treated Mexican heritage not as a subtext but as structure, anchoring the character in Mesoamerican mythology while filtering it through modern science and politics. The first Aztec, Uno, was raised by the Q Society, a secret organization that trained him from birth to become Quetzalcoatl's champion. His armor, an artifact of divine design and human engineering, granted flight, invisibility, enhanced perception, plasma generation, and control over mass and density. Decades later, the mantle returned through Nayela Constant, a Mexican-American software engineer in Justice League of America 2017. Where Uno's journey was about destiny, Nayela's is about agency. She inherits the title of Aztec, but refuses to treat the divinity as instruction. Her expertise in technology reframes the armor not as a relic, but as an interface, an instrument through which she explores the convergence of myth, science, and cultural identity. By grounding the story in her own intellect and background, DC expanded the meaning of the mantle beyond chosen savior to conscious successor. Both incarnations reflect a continuity of themes rather than lineage. Aztek remains one of DC's few heroes whose origin and purpose are inseparable from the indigenous Mexican cosmology. Whether as Uno or Nayeli, the role functions as a bridge, linking the gods of the past with the world that inherited them, and redefining what a modern hero drawn from their heritage can be. What's striking about these characters isn't that they exist, but how they fill the gaps in DC's larger mythology. Each one reframes a familiar idea: the alien, the detective, the warrior, the survivor, through a different cultural lens. The result isn't a separate canon of Hispanic heroes, but a more complete version of the universe they inhabit. Across decades of continuity, these characters have been written and rewritten in response to what the medium could handle at the time. The thinking here isn't a moral uplift or representation. For its own sake, it's texture. These characters make the DC universe feel lived in. While they share proximity to real experience, their origins, Detroit, El Paso, Santa Prisca, aren't abstractions. They're location with political and emotional weight, and that's what gives their stories performance. They carry the marks of where they come from, and that detail is what keeps them human in a mythology that often forgets what humanity looks like. If you followed me this far, I'd like to know which of these characters stand out to you the most, who you think deserves more attention, and whose story reflects what DC does when it's at its most grounded. Leave a comment below, let's talk about it. And if you want to see more of these deep dives into corners of DC history, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's next. For now, take care and have an awesome day.